Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning to those of you physically here in the room, and hello especially to our online audience, who I believe we have many thousands watching the live streaming that's provided today. If you're wondering why I'm looking a little bit sun-kissed, I've just returned from Jamaica, and I've been assured that the social enterprise community in Jamaica are also watching this live stream, so a particular welcome to them. One love. Okay. We have a fantastic agenda for you today. I think this is a really remarkable summit, bringing together the very best from the private sector, the very best from the social sector, from policymakers, academics, researchers, right across the spectrum. The social value agenda is one that brings everybody together that has an interest in building a fair and just Britain, one that's enterprising, one that's entrepreneurial, and one that's helping to breathe life back into the communities where it's needed most. So it is a fantastic day that we have ahead. We have three eminent speakers to kick off with. We're going to start with the Lord Young, who's the Prime Minister's advisor on small businesses and enterprise and has a long career, recently recognised and rewarded with his Companion of Honour in the New Year's Honours. We've also got Adrian Ringrold, who's Chief Exec of Ringrose, who's Chief Exec of Interserve, who are our conference partners today. And Interserve, again, have been one of the leading companies that have really been driving social value through to the core of their business. And then thirdly, we're going to be joined by Lord Victor Adebowale, Chief Exec of Turning Point, patron of Social Enterprise UK, and someone, again, with a very long history of developing and delivering social value across communities right across the UK. And then we've got a really interesting set of workshops. I think there's 8 throughout the course of today. Those workshops are led by people who could justifiably be keynote speakers in their own rights. But we have such a high quality range of contributors today. You'll find some fantastic contributions in the workshops, and they're also all being live streamed as well online. Straight after this first session, we're going to have some opportunities for questions and answers to the panel, time permitting. And then we have coffee downstairs where registration began. And then we move into the workshops. And those workshops are clearly identified as to where they're taking place in your programs. And of course, there's lots and lots of very helpful staff from our event partners, Fuse Events, the Social Enterprise themselves, and from Social Enterprise UK staff as well. So do feel free to ask them any questions should you have them. I'm reckoning you already know where the fire exits are and the toilets are, so I'm not going to bother with that. Suffice to say, there are no alarms scheduled, so if you do hear one, it is a real alarm, not a test. So let's kick off. As I say, I think we're really privileged to have the three speakers that we have in this first session. And one particularly that I've have a huge amount of respect for over a number of years is Lord Young. And Lord Young has been recently chairing, on behalf of the government, the Social Value Review. Still due to report, but I'm sure he's been engaged with many of us in this room already, finding out about how it's working in and around the country, in different sectors, in different sizes of businesses, in different industries. And so it's, with no further ado, I welcome Lord Young to take the stage. He's promised me that he won't go on for any more than 50 minutes. I'm hoping that he was jesting. Lord Young, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I've been around for a rather long time. I can say without any doubt at all I'm the oldest person in the room, and that always gives me great comfort because I can talk about times long ago and you can't dispute what I say. But my background, which is important for this particular point, is I was a lawyer. I worked for 5 years in a large company, and I set up my own business in 1961, was the year I originally started, and carried on. And why that's interesting, in 1971, the Bolton report came out, which was the last report on small firms before mine. And Mr. Bolton said, small firms are on the way out. Seems unreal today. They will not last much longer. It's economies of scale. Of course, what he didn't say, that taxation and restrictions and everything were such in those days that it was very difficult to actually start. Well, I came into the Department of Industry back in '79, looking at the first of the small firms things, and like an old dog who's only got one trick, I'm doing the same thing today, and it's carrying on. But the world has changed. Today, over 19 out of 20 companies in the land employ fewer than 10 people. We've seen an enormous increase in self-employment. All the barriers to setting up a business have come tumbling down, particularly with technology, using the net and using smartphones even. You can today set up a business. And the other side, the other big change, is why you're all in this room today. It's the growth of social enterprises. Social enterprises hardly existed, if they existed at all, 20 years ago. And today it's the fastest growing side of the whole of the small firms area. And indeed, all the surveys show that now a majority of young people at 18 want to work for themselves, but don't quite know how, and also want to set up a social enterprise rather than anything else. Of course, will they in time? That's one of the problems we've been doing. So I've issued 3 reports. The final one is out next week, I hope, on small firms, looking from startups to growth, and in particular, looking at how the public sector has successfully excluded small firms from all its purchasing requirements. Now, this is £250 billion worth of business a year. PQQs, which I have no doubt started off with the best of intentions, ended up being 30 or 40 pages of nonsense form filling, and any self-respecting small firm would one look at this in disgust and leave it. And of course, large companies would have departments that would actually do this. And so they're being abolished. In a few weeks' time, we're going to have one site. This applies to your world as well as the general world. One site in which every single public sector contract is going to be placed. You'll get intimations of future business. You'll see what it is, and when the contract is placed, you'll see the price at which it's placed, so it'll be transparency. And that's the first time in the world we're doing this, and this covers the whole gamut. If it's central, local, health, education, police, fire, ambulance, you name it, if it's in the public sector, it will be over 25,000. Under 25, it's not worth it. So all these things have been coming on, and I think, and incidentally, I should tell you that central government has been doing this for the past 3 years, and in particular in IT, and it's showing incredible savings because small companies are more innovative, they find different ways of dealing with it, and the prices sometimes that we've seen, I do not exaggerating, 60, 70% lower figures, and it's made an enormous change. And then, being an innocent, I was sitting one day in my office quite quietly, and the then Minister for the Civil Service came in and said, I'd like you to conduct a review. I said, of course. He said, on social value. And I said, well, yes, but what is it? And that's part of the problem, that I had not heard of what social, not that I haven't heard of it, but I suspect an awful lot of people have not heard of social value. And so for the past few months, we've been looking into social value. And the more I heard about it, the better I thought the idea was. But like all good ideas, they depend upon execution. And what we must not do is, by trying to increase social value, we restore all the bureaucracy that we've just been taken out to open up the whole of the public sector to small firms. Social value as a concept will work perfectly if we can compare 2 prices, one with a social value element and one without a social value element, and make a fair judgment as to which is the most advantageous contract. And this means we've got to find an objective way in which we can value the social value element of any contract. We've got to think through, if I'm trying to buy desks, and I get one figure which is just a cash price. I get another figure that includes school milk. I get another figure that includes, say, prisoner rehabilitation. How do I judge between the two? It's very difficult in central government when different departments have different objectives, and a commissioner for a particular central government department has only one objective, only one budget to look at whatever the scope of that department, so anything else becomes irrelevant. It's easier for local government, who have a much broader gamut of things. But these are the areas that we still have to look into, and I hope when my report comes out, which will not be that much longer, we'll see we've got some way to go to really work out how this works best. Second thing is, it's still not widely enough known, and it's only under 2 years since the whole thing came in. And I think as we look ahead and we find it becoming more and more widely known, more and more acceptable, and we will develop a set of rules, I think there's a very good place, a very serious place for social value in this world, because we must, in whatever government, whatever happens in the future, we are going through a period of economic stringency, and government has to make money. Any government has to make money go further. And a great way of making money go further, a great way of spreading benefit, is looking to see if you can place social value. So I was delighted to come here today, and I am very interested in the whole of your program. And I hope that when the report comes out, say it won't be that much longer, we'll see this as another stage on the way of making social value not only universally acceptable, but playing a very real role in the life of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Young, and thank you for being here. And I'm sure all look forward to seeing the recommendations that emerge from that review. And you said that will be out in a couple of weeks. You hit it here first. Secondly, I'm delighted that we've got Adrian Ringrose here. Adrian joined Interserve, I believe, in 2003. Is that right, Adrian? A little bit before that, okay. Came Chief Exec in 2003. And over that period, the company has grown from around 8,000 staff to today's number of around 40,000. Higher, 50,000. I'll shoot my researcher. Anyway. It's probably our website. It's probably the website that's out of date. You can shoot your web team, in which case. Anyway, it's fantastic how I think one of the reflections that I've got on the Social Value Act as a piece of legislation was there was a little bit of hesitancy about what this might mean for larger businesses and how they might view it. I think one thing that's been really encouraging is the dialogue and the conversation, the discussions that have emerged with small businesses, but also with large businesses about the role that they can play in the creation of social value within our communities. So I'm delighted, Adrian, that you've joined us today and that you're sponsoring this event alongside Social Enterprise UK, and delighted and interested to find out what you've got to say next. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everybody. Lord Young, thank you very much for your message of pragmatism and support, and we'll wait a little longer for the review. But in anticipation of what it might say, I thought I'd sort of share with you some of our thinking around social value. Should start with just reminding that this is the second Social Value Summit. We were partners, Peter, together last year on the first one. So I think that says something about the relationship between the social sector and business that we're here again. As a business, we trace our history back as part of what we now call public services to the time of Christopher Wren. So we've been around for a while, and since then we've had quite a long journey through lighterage, through dredging, through road building, through construction, outsourcing, and all the way more public services. So the chances are that in coming here today, our business has probably touched your lives in some way, in transport, in retail. You might have dropped your kids off at one of the schools that we maintain in service. I raise that not as a marketing pitch, although it is a marketing pitch, but to give you an indication of our historical role in shaping the environment, acting as an agent of change, but also being able to respond to the challenges of change. And certainly our long history as an organisation is one of the factors that is important in ensuring that we take a long-term view on our business, how it's positioned, and crucially, how we all behave. That, in turn, is what led us to launch 2 years ago our far-reaching, we like to think, ambitious sustainability programme. That's our blueprint through which we face the challenges and the opportunities of operating sustainably in the 21st century. So to us, the publication of the Social Value Act was timely, but largely coincidental catalyst for promoting the relevance of sustainability more broadly. But what a happy coincidence it's turned out to be. So let me just say a couple of words about our programme, Sustainabilities. As I say, it's a plan, it shapes our actions, but it also reflects how we think, joined up and about more than money. It's constructed around what we refer to as 4 capitals: natural, knowledge, social and financial, the assets that we need in our business model. So let me illustrate that a little bit more. We're one of the country's largest land managers, probably the largest land manager. We have a deep understanding of the needs and challenges of managing natural ecosystems and also sustaining rural businesses and communities. We're a significant buyer of timber, and our cleaning businesses now use a huge range of nature-based cleaning materials. We're committed to reducing our water usage. We've pioneered water recycling technology in our Middle Eastern business, where we have a workforce of 25,000 people involved in construction activities which consume vast quantities of what is an incredibly scarce resource. And whilst right now we might be experiencing a little bit of price easement in energy prices, we know that our future energy supplies need to be decarbonised, and we've committed to halving our carbon footprint by 2020. And we hope to be a significantly bigger business by then. So our programme has enabled us to see the changes that we need to make, but also to identify the pathway through which we're going to get there. It's been a really powerful galvanising force to capture the imagination and the commitment of our people. So it describes 5 outcomes, 15 goals, 48 targets, and we're committed to reporting on progress. So it's not just waffle. The first year report is in your packs, and we're in the process of writing up our second year report as we speak. That'll be out later this month. So that's our thinking around sustainability. What about social value in public services? Well, the provision of public services, as I've said, is a substantial part of our work, at the moment accounting for around half of our turnover, so around 1.5 billion a year. The government's been our biggest customer through one guise or another for many years, and we genuinely regard ourselves as public servants. Many of our people, myself included, have worked for the public sector directly, and we provide vital services to the public. We look after the training estate for the Ministry of Defence. As I said, we act as the landlord for 1% of the country. We provide healthcare for people in their homes and to health service providers, and we've helped 20,000 long-term unemployed people back into work through our role in the work programme. So as an emergent force in helping us all determine what good looks like in public services, maybe you can start to see why the concept of social value is attractive to us and why we feel we've got something to offer. As a business, our vision, the shaping force on all of us, is to redefine the future for people and places. That's about a lot more than building a decent road or making attractive, energy-efficient buildings, although we do those things and we'd like to think we do them well. It's actually, for us, about shaping the communities in which we operate, reducing our impact on the environment, investing in the education, skills, welfare of our people and of the future workforce, young people, apprentices, graduates, and of supporting social development, particularly through charitable works and through giving support to disadvantaged groups in society, including ex-offenders. As a major employer, we are serious about investing in the development and the skills of thousands of people, and we're working hard to measure our impacts. We employ 50,000, probably nearer 55,000 people in the UK today. So how we measure the impact that we have on improving skills, improving education standards, reducing levels of crime and deprivation in our communities is important to us. And we're beginning to measure those impacts, to benchmark ourselves and to plan how we can do even more. I'll come back to that shortly. That focus on how we operate and on our commitments to manage our business for the long term as a good corporate citizen is what I suppose, in its essence, we mean by sustainability, and it certainly shapes how we work with our partners, public sector, small businesses, and third sector organisations. And that neatly segues into Purple Futures, which is our new partnership, which as of Sunday is delivering probation services with third sector and social enterprise partners. We're doing that in 5 regions across the UK. So we're the lead partner, and we'll interface primarily with the Ministry of Justice in that sense. But delivery on the ground, we're absolutely dependent on the grassroots expertise of our partners, Adaction, Shelter, P3, 3SC. They're helping to shape and provide key services, particularly involving support with housing, with drug and alcohol rehabilitation. In this endeavour, we are totally focused on and measured by the social value that we add. So, I've mentioned measurement a couple of times. In your bags today, you'll find our white paper on how we measure and map social impact. Like most businesses, we've got bags and bags of data. We're drowning in it. Some of it we turn into information and we use conventionally to report on our progress, measuring our financial performance, our safety performance, our people data, our risk data. And in most cases, that's very effective, and it helps us as managers and it helps our investors focus on where our efforts need to be concentrated. But most of the tools through which we access our data are static, and they're bounded by our business silos, our departments, our functions, our customers, our markets. In seeking to understand the social value that we're creating, we believe we need to see our business in the context of the communities where we're operating, where our people live, and we therefore need something different. After all, social value is about people and place. It's not really about business unit and division and function. So we need to be having something more fluid, that's less hidebound by structure and certainly by the tyranny of spreadsheets. So what we've been doing to find out about our impact is to set about building a mapping tool that seeks to show how our business impacts our community. So we've been sucking some data out of our systems, payroll, staff residential data. We've been combining that with our supply chain spend and breaking that down by depots and local offices, not by invoice processing addresses, many of which are outside the UK. That information is then combined with publicly available data on things like multiple indices of deprivation, reported crime, average income per household, travel to work patterns, etc., and we map it. And the map can then be interrogated to show how the impact that we have is changing over time. The white paper explains our thinking in more depth than I could hope to do, certainly in the time available. But I hope you can begin to see why it's going to be a useful tool for helping us understand how we drive social value, to measure, to target, and hopefully to inspire us all to do even more. There's a lot to do, and I'm looking forward to hearing progress and ideas being shared in today's discussions. One last area I'd like to say a few words on, and again, in true style, there's something in your pack, is the public's attitude towards big business. So this is hot off the press. I hope you find it of interest. It's our society report on changing attitudes towards big business in society. It's the first in what we hope will be the series of reports surveying public attitudes around business. For many of us, some of what's in here won't come as a great surprise, that there is a fair degree of cynicism and mistrust out there. But there's also a clear call to action. I think it is clear that big business can and must do more. Its role in building prosperity in the nation and providing goods and services and employment isn't well understood. Certainly the contribution that business makes, particularly big business, in terms of training and development around locally rooted community involvement isn't well appreciated. But there are some encouraging signs too. What we found in the research is that if we can visibly demonstrate the social and environmental impact we're having, we will be rewarded with recognition and we can regain trust. That may seem obvious, but despite the significant increase in the numbers of companies adopting sustainable business strategies and straplines, the message has failed to break through. So I hope you find it an interesting read. I urge you to take a look if you get a few minutes. So let me conclude on how we see the Social Value Act and the whole concept of social value. I should start by congratulating Chris White for steering the Act through Parliament. with help from Hazel Blears and others along the way, and clearly to the government for supporting it, and to Lord Young for investing his time and energy in moving it into the next phase. To me, good regulation is regulation that outlines what needs to be done without being overly prescriptive and instructing us as to how we should go about doing it, so that we can collaborate. I think the Act has laid down the challenge to those of us working in the public sector to be innovative in the way we operate. I'd encourage all of us to think about social value as not necessarily something new, but giving us a new framework through which to evaluate what good looks like, moving us away from a focus purely on a price point for a given activity to the impact on a community measured more broadly than just the narrow economics of the contracting party. So in that sense, it's a new language, but it's one we should all learn and use. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrian. Really, really fascinating insight. And this is the white paper that Adrian was referring to, Communities in Context, Social Value Mapping, which is particularly interesting, looking at the new opportunities that are genuinely transformational in terms of using new open data to actually look at kind of economic inputs and outcomes in different communities down to neighbourhood level. There's a great opportunity for further collaboration between a number of different sectors to really, really draw out the new opportunities that the data is potentially providing us and equipping us with. Moving on from the role of private business, and I think we all recognise that private business has taken, has been through a challenging time in terms of its relationship with society and the public over recent years, partly because of things like the banking scandal and the economic crisis in 2008, and there's a long way to go and kind of renew some of those relationships and that trust. Someone that's been kind of talking social value, the language of, but particularly as a social sector chief executive, but also as someone that's got a huge role within commissioning and procurement as well, is our next speaker. He's a patron of Social Enterprise UK. He started his career as an estate manager in Newham, is that right, Victor? A road sweeper in Wakefield, and look at you now. You've gone from being, one of those vanguards of society to being actually one of the least trusted, even more so than business people in the country in terms of politicians who actually in the trust matrix come right at the bottom of those trust ratings right now. So there's a lot of work for us all to do in terms of building bridges and trust back in with society. Victor can claim, I suppose, a bicard on that, being a crossbench peer and appointed in 2001 after some great work with both Centrepoint, young homeless charity, and his current role as chief exec at Turning Point. I'm sure many of you in the room will already know Victor, taking the lens of social value to both social sector organisations and to commissioning and procurement. Our next speaker, Lord Victor Adebowale. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's the first time I've been introduced in such a fantastic and complimentary way. I'm joking. Not trusted, my God. Why? Why would you not trust me? I'm only a member of the House of Lords. Oh, by the way, I got here by public transport. Okay, so a couple of things I need to do first. First thing I need to tell you is that I actually do a number of things that when somebody like me stands up, I'm introduced as a kind of social sector, charity, whatever, and I think it skews everything I'm going to say, all right? So what I'm going to tell you is that I'm a businessman. I run a business, all right? I run a business that turns over a minnow compared with our last speaker, who, by the way, I thought was an excellent speaker. A minnow, so only 100 million quid, 3,600 staff, operates in 250 locations, providing services to people with mental health, learning disabilities, substance misuse, primary care, and employment, all points in between. I also sit on the board of a small company, small business actually, called THP, because I wanted to understand what the difference is, if there is one, And I certainly am sympathetic, not only sympathetic, I wholeheartedly agree with the points that Lord Young has made. It's not just that the barriers to market entry, it's that if you are a large company, it's in your interest to actually create those barriers. It's one of the things I notice as I walk into the House of Lords is who's sitting in the reception. And it's one of the reasons why many of the offices around Westminster are actually occupied by lobbyists. And let me tell you, they don't work for Turning Point or THP. And I've also set up a community interest company called Collaborate. And I set up Collaborate simply because I don't really believe in public services. Shock horror. I believe in services to the public. I don't really make the distinction between what is public, private, and not-for-profit. And the reason why I don't make that distinction is because the banking crisis was such a shock. I absolutely agree with the point that's been made about business needing to improve its standing with the public. Frankly, it's got a long way to go, and why should that be a surprise? Every single one of us in this room has contributed £24,000, whether we liked it or not, to the survival of the British economy. That's what's happened. Once the banking crisis was described to me once as one of the biggest bank robberies in the history of Western capitalism. And the horrible thing about it is that it was an inside job and the buggers have got away with it. Quite remarkable. True, though, true. So, it strikes me that we need a different paradigm for what is services to the public. And I set up Collaborate simply because the demarcation between what is public, private, and not-for-profit is kind of meaningless, really. What we need is a new paradigm of collaboration, in which the services to the public are defined by what the public needs. How many of you can actually survive without a bank account? Should banks operate simply in the interests of shareholders, or do they have a wider public good and public interest, which should be measured, for which they are accountable, because when they go wrong, we pay? Indeed, and this might not be particularly helpful to some companies, if you are a large provider of services to the public, like Interserve or Circa or any of the others, where if you were to disappear from the public realm, we would know, and Interserve certainly is one of those companies, what is your duty to the public in ensuring those services continue, regardless, indeed, of whether they are profitable or return shareholder value? Where is the demarcation between shareholder value and your duty to the public? And how do we measure that? Those are the fundamental questions that I think drive the future of services to the public, and those are the questions which I think should be of interest to everyone in this room. The realities of the public sector are very stark and very real, and I face them every single day. We are looking at health and local authority cuts, 20 billion. I mean, I'm not going to get into whether they were necessary or not, because that's irrelevant. They are what they are. These cuts have occurred. 40% cuts in core funding to local authorities, 40%. Now, you think about your companies, think about your organisations coping with a 40% cut. Local government in this country is probably one of the most efficient forms of service to the public we have actually got, and I would indeed compare it with many other countries as favourable. We are reducing adult social care budgets by 2.68 billion. Most of you in this room who deliver any kind of health or social care service will understand when I say the front line is under serious and enduring pressure, and it's set to continue. So there's never been a better time for us to have transparency about what social value means and what social value is. And I have to say the Social Value Act was fantastic, introducing the concept that commissioners should look beyond the economic benefits of a provider and consider their social value. Although, being a sceptical person, I understand and I consider it a duty of every member of the public to be sceptical, not cynical, sceptical. I thought, this is one of the fastest acts ever to pass through Parliament. I think I said it, didn't I? And my measure of an act is if it passes really, really quickly, It's probably because all the teeth have been extracted. So I've always argued that as an act and as a concept, fantastic. It needs to develop and deliver the teeth necessary for it to actually drive the way in which we deliver services to the public. It is yet to do that. Although in my sector, in health and social care, we have seen some indications that commissioners are starting to notice it, but, and we know this, we both know this, price point, let's not fool ourselves, is still the driver of most contract. We don't measure social value. I think it's fantastic that Interserve are starting to measure social value. Frankly, you're probably one of the few organisations in this room that can actually afford to do that, given the price points that are available and the margins that are shrinking. So we need a social value act which actually delivers social value in some definable way. And Turning Point creates social value in many different ways. Every hour, someone leaves our substance misuse services, drug and alcohol free. The chances of them coming back there's about a 4% chance of them coming back within 6 months. I can tell you that our connected care services, for every £1 spent, somebody in the audience who should correct me, but I think we save something between £6.40 and £29. So we know that we can deliver services in partnership with communities that save money for everyone. We know that. We know that our employment and mental health services can make a difference to an individual's mental capacity such that they're able to work. That's the key, and we can measure that through their anxiety and depression scores. We can do all that. The problem, it seems to me, is that we don't really have an industry standard for what social value is. We account for things on a standard basis, but we don't account for social value. And until we do, it's going to be very difficult to talk about it in any reasonable way. And while I note the hymn against bureaucracy, some bureaucracies are necessary. And if it's important, you measure it. It's very simple. And if it's really important, you measure it the same way. So social value requires some measures. And I think it'd be really powerful for organisations like Turning Point, Interserve and others to actually get together to think about what does good, industry standard, social value measurement look like that allows the small organisations and the large organisations to make the comparisons that enable Lord Young's points to be actually seen in reality, so you can compare like with like. Because, and I will say this, you will find over the next 5 years, every company, be it not-for-profit, for-profit, public sector, wanting to cloak itself in what they consider to be social value. Frankly, it's meaningless unless we can measure it. So let me come to the end. I want to conclude by pointing out a couple of things, a wish list that me and my colleagues at Collaborate came up with, which you might find interesting. Collaboration has been mentioned by, I think, both our previous speakers. It's critical. We all talk about it, we're not very good at doing it. In my view, it's the future of services to the public, and it's the only way by which we can get together measures for social value. Our wish list is the following. We need a new focus on services to the public. It's not just about public service reform, it's about services to the public. The demarcation is meaningless in most people's mind. We need a lasting shift from supply to demand. We need to look at how we look at the demand that creates many of the pressures in our public services. We need to reset our approach to outsourcing. Interestingly enough, this evening I'm actually chairing a meeting in the House looking at this whole issue of public sector and public service outsourcing. Wishing away private or public sector delivery is pointless. We need a range of resource and expertise. We need everyone in the room when designing principles and public value when we're looking at alternatives. We need to understand and develop collaborative leaders across our services to the public realm, and we need more creative models of local devolution so that we know that what the services that people get are bespoke to their needs, because actually we also know that one size doesn't fit all. There are some challenges that I want to throw at you before getting off this stage. The first is we need a measure of social value. How do we create that? How do we really get collaboration across the sectors such that what we deliver is meaningful to the public, and they're the ones that actually tell us what the value is to them. Value for people, not just value for money. We need to pull resources and benchmarking in ways in which different providers in the area can work together to demonstrate how wide their value is spread, how wide it goes, how deep it is. And we need to mandate a social value approach to avoid a race to the bottom. The words are fine, but what I see in many social care settings is actually a race to the bottom. And finally, for our colleagues in Jamaica, thank you very much.
Thanks, Victor. Great stuff. Thank you. Now, I think we're just going to get those 3 chairs up on the stage. If someone could help me with that, if I can get a colleague to bring those up. We'll ask the speakers to join us on stage, and we can open up the conversation to some of the questions that you may have. Just to say that this Act, when it emerged, I mean, I think it's really interesting just to recognise where it did come from. And I can see in the room there's a couple of people that were with me on that journey as social enterprise ambassadors back in the day under the last government. And I can see Jean over there. And there were a few of us that got together and came up with this notion that wouldn't it be crazy to have this kind of commissioning and procurement world whereby social value was also considered. And then with our members, we got it into the manifesto, and the members campaigned for it, and we were joined by lots and lots of partner organisations to get this through. And then Chris White, MP, as a private members bill, took this through, and everyone said, you're not going to get it through. I think even Victor, you said to me, you're not going to get it through. And privately in a meeting, I think you once suggested that private members bills rarely make it all the way through because of time constraints and all sorts of other things. And so Nick Hurd and Hazel Blears, Nick Hurd on behalf of the government and Hazel on behalf of Labour, did a fantastic job in steering this through very, very delicate committee stages to land it to where it is. And 2 years in, the questions are now becoming much more nuanced. And that's where you come in. So where does the Social Value Act, where should it go next? What does this mean for us all? Does it cost more? We produced a report just a few months ago called Communities Count, which actually showed that those using the Social Value Act at a commissioning level were benefiting from greater levels of innovation, better community relationships, and in more than 50% of cases, cost savings. So this notion that social value does cost more is one that's already being challenged. If I could ask our 3 speakers to join me on stage, I'll look out for the first question. Does anyone have a question that can kick us off? If not, does it cost more? Does it need to cost more?
Is that a question?
It's a question. While I'm waiting for them to get their minds in the right place to ask questions, I thought I would kick off. Victor, in your experience, does it cost more?
If it's done well, it should cost less, because it's all about how you define it's all about what commissioning is. So most services aren't commissioned; they're purchased. Those are 2 different things. That's why there are 2 different words in the dictionary. And commissioning is about understanding the needs of an individual and/or a community, such that you can build a platform for procurement. And there's contracting, and then there's all the other things. Where commissioning is done well with social value in mind, it's always cheaper because you're co-producing services. Where it's done badly, and I noted, I mean, I don't think I did think that it was going to fail. I was quite honest about my criticisms of the Social Value Act. It was fast and it needs more teeth. I still think it's a brilliant piece of legislation. But it needed, where it's done, one of the criticisms I heard from the private sector and the public sector was that it would add to bureaucracy, and there wasn't a force majeure for them to do it. So the guys that did it were punished because the guys that didn't do it got the contract because they were cheaper. Now we have to get out of that cycle, otherwise we won't get the... Oh, by the way, congratulations on the gong.
Thanks. Anyway, I see some questions. Perfect. So I'm going to take you, sir, in the middle, and then I'll come forward to you.
Hi, yeah. My name's Guy Battle from the Social Value Portal. So I'm interested in the panel's view on progress at public sector level or local authority level. In particularly, I see the market. I mean, we've got businesses that are responding, but one of the key issues that we're finding, certainly in the work we're doing in local authorities, is that the demand side isn't there. They're really not enacting the act. They're struggling with how to write it. They're struggling with what it means. They're struggling with legal issues. So I'm kind of interested in what you guys think ought to happen to enhance the demand side of this equation.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll take you, sir, Andy.
Yeah. I live in Wales and we're about to legislate on the well-being of future generations coming up in the next couple of months. And for me, I suppose, one of the questions is, how do we measure the capacity in communities, their ability to produce? Because a lot of the language still seems to be about doing to, rather than actually, how do we develop that capacity for people to be alert, to be aware, to respond, to build their own capacity? If we were measuring in nature, we'd be measuring the depth and health of the soil. So it's a different kind of measure, I think, we might be needing to look for. Okay,
it's an interesting point. A question. Tom, is there a mic? Thanks. Tom Levitt.
Thank you. No introduction needed then. One of the advantages of social value for a private sector company is the benefits of employee engagement that ensue from that. We've so far been talking about providers of services to government, of commissioning and so on, but how can we encourage the private sector to take a social value approach within business-to-business relationships as well as just business to public sector?
Good question. Okay, well, we'll hold on there for a second and ask perhaps Lord Young if you'd like to respond to all or any of those questions.
Yeah, I think a thread running all the way through them is that in commissioning, in purchasing, you need rigour. You have to be able to measure, otherwise it becomes too vague. So what is the social value? Is the social value inherent in the contract itself, or is it something that's added onto the contract so that when you compare the two, you get this as a bonus? And if so, how do you value that bonus? So the road to somewhere is paved with good intentions. I think that this is long on good intentions, but short at the moment on practical vigour. Second thing is, not many people know about it. We all know about it in this room, but if you go out to local authorities up and down the land, not only do they not know about it, many buyers can't be bothered because they've got their own objectives. So we've got to think about somebody who's buying desks, only thinks about buying desks. How can we make him interested in getting something more than just this outfit?
And Adrian, I don't know whether you want to pick up on any of those comments and questions, but how do you see this whole agenda moving forwards?
I'd echo what Lord Young's just said, I think, and Victor's point about the difference between procurement and commissioning is important here. We're seeing mixed behaviours amongst the people to whom we're selling services, but there's more on the side of price economics, because not just that's probably front of mind, but also it provides a decision-making framework which is familiar, which has rigour, which has precedent. We're introducing a different, broader framework here for which there is no common language, no common currency, therefore it's hard to make comparisons. And with no disrespect to any public servant, they're probably as interested in running a good process as they are in getting the right outcome. And they do sometimes, therefore, let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So this is why it's so important for us to get measurement, language, common sort of currency in place as quickly and as swiftly as possible.
The thing about commissioning procurement is that the process needs to match the intent, and often the intention is unclear, so the process is rubbish. It's basically tick box, and then they have regulation, which is a bit like weighing pigs, which never makes them any fatter. So what we need is a process that matches the intent, and in that, outcomes there are some clues about how we might get some standardisation in the way that Lord Young has quite rightly pointed out. The first is we need to look at outcomes. What are the outcomes required and in this area for this service, for these people? Because that should drive, the intention is the outcome, that should drive the process. there's the Del-Amy switch. So there's something about working out what the cost to the public purse is in achieving these outcomes beyond the delivery of desks. So if you're in Aberdare and the local authority buys some desks that are manufactured in, I don't know, Taiwan, say, and they're dirt cheap, but meanwhile there's a carpenter and several carpenters in that community that could, with some additional staff, make those desks at a couple of quid more, but actually employs people, trains people. That's how you build. That's how you build the future, and you reduce the cost of the public purse. So that is calculable. So we could do that. So there are some clues. The final point is, I think the point that was made about the chap there about communities. The biggest challenge to most public service to the public reform is not that we can't do it. It's that in order to do it, there needs to be a shift of power away from what we consider to be the bureaucracies in charge to the people who actually receive the services. And if you want the clues to that, you look at the most really high-end electronics or retail, they design with the customer as opposed to for the customer. And that is a fundamental challenge for all services to the public, whether they're provided by the private, public or not-for-profit sectors.
Okay, you can.
On the point about staff engagement that Tom raised, I think it's absolutely legitimate that there should be something in this for us as well. Here we are, I think in Southwark, London Borough of Southwark. We've got about 900 employees in Southwark who work live and work in the borough. So us stimulating their engagement with the community is very natural, very virtuous thing to do, but I don't think we should deny that we get something out of that too. Happy people are more productive people, makes us a better business, makes us more successful. I think there's actually a lot more we have in common than we think, the public and the private and the shareholder and the customer interest. They're not necessarily so conflicting. They're a lot more complementary. But
Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions. There's one there, certainly, from that lady.
Hi, Leslie Alphin from Practivate. First of all, I think a little perspective leveling. I come from the States, and I've never seen this happen there. So congrats to everybody. This conversation doesn't take place over there, and I'm thrilled to be here about that. The definition of the social, first of all, I've not heard any of you tell us what the definition of social value is. There's a lot of general discussion. And you can't set, an objective, and you can't set an outcome unless we all agree to what that means. Now, I see that one of the issues is that we're also trying to backfill, it seems to me, sort of plug into a static linear process that exists, something that's continuously in flux. What's needed today is not what's needed tomorrow, and what's needed tomorrow is what's not needed the next day. And both the government sectors and the private sector's ability to catch up with that flux on any given day is nearly impossible due to the existing structures. Now, it's not much easier for smaller enterprises either, but it's a little bit easier for us. So it just seems to me that this is all very nice and a lot of great discussion, and somewhere, you have to start somewhere. But you're back to the same old conundrum, which is how do you measure or somehow create a balance between quantifiable and qualitative? So I'd like to just hear some comments on that.
Well, it was a comment rather than a question. It's always the challenge with these question and answer sessions. Everyone has got a lot to say. There are going to be lots and lots of opportunities to thrash this stuff out throughout the workshops. And there are a whole series, 8 different themed workshops that I'm hoping that some of those conversations will be able to develop in. Does anyone have any comments in relation to that? I mean, I think the congratulations are important. This legislation is now being extended through EU procurement directives. Canada are looking at this legislation. Scotland have the Procurement Reform Act, which covers goods and works as well as services. And so this has really stimulated a much broader conversation that's happening right across the world. Adrian, did you want to make some comments?
I was going to suggest you read our report, because we are actually making a lot of headway in measuring. But some of it can be really quite simple. How many people do you employ within 10 miles of where you're doing your work? How far is your supply supply chain travelling to do its work for you. That is measurable. It's got a social value in the context of the local community. It's got an economic value in terms of not wasting money on fuel and overnight accommodation for people living away from home, etc., etc. We don't need to be daunted by this. It can be very pragmatic. We just need to build it up in a way that and look at it through a different lens.
Lord Young.
Look, if there are 200 people in this room, I suspect there are 200 definitions of social value. So one of the early things we have to do is to work out what do we mean by social value. Once we know what we're looking for, we can look for it. Take the last example. Is it valid social value to count how many people work within a 10-mile radius of anywhere? How do you value that against a similar contract where people are employed 20 miles away or 30 miles away? And so until we actually agree what we're talking about, it's going to be very difficult to take it further. And I think that's part, when you look at the review, there are a number of questions which we've still got to answer. And of course there should be, because to my knowledge, nobody's done this before. We're doing something for the first time. So we should begin to define it. But in the end of the day, if you're talking about commissioning or purchasing, rigor is the word you've really got to remember, because otherwise it lays open to bad practices.
Victor, any final thoughts in terms of definitions?
I think Adrian has a very good point. I think the point is we shouldn't let the excellent get in the way of the good enough. You know, let's start somewhere. I would err on the side of, I think Collaborate's been doing some work on this, but I do think that what we need is to try an industry standard. Maybe it's based on the work that you're doing, but it needs to be something that's acceptable to the public and not for dividend sectors, so that it can be rolled out, trialled with some of the larger providers, some small providers, some that has the required rigor that Lord Young so rightly pointed out, and it's testable. You know, so let's start with a measure. You know, that's how accountancy got started. Somebody tried, and then let's repeat it and refine it. But let's start somewhere.
Thanks very much, Victor. Okay, it's time for coffee. Just a couple of final things from me. I was with the global managing partner of one of the big accountancy firms, just touching on what Victor was saying, and he was saying that within 10 years, 15 years, this will either be mandated. Every company is going to have to report across its social, environmental and its economic performance in a much more integrated way. And that will either be voluntary adoption or that will be mandated, that will be kind of enforced. And so I think we have to recognise that we are on a journey here and that it is starting and that it is emerging, and social value in some industries means something wholly different from in other industries. And I think that the risk actually to this conversation and dialogue is that we do try and create a single sentence definition and a single unit of currency that we can all measure it by, because we know that social value is in essence subjective, and we have to kind of just learn to live with that and continue these conversations and work out what it means in different spheres of life and different walks of life and different industries. Coffee is now served downstairs. You've been a great group to start and kick off the day with. Thank you to our speakers for making the time in their busy schedules to come along and build kind of the context of the rest of the conversations that are going to flow today. We do have some incredible workshops for you lined up, and then we have the Right Honourable Hazel Blears coming to deliver a closing keynote this afternoon at about 4:30. So go and enjoy coffee and enjoy your next session of workshops. Thanks very much.
It's late in the